Hello there, and Merry Christmas! In this video, I'm bringing you a few creepy Christmas stories from various authors. We have a story with some rules, a story with a bit of poetry, another one about a deadly Christmas game, and a few more. Make sure to check the description if you'd like to see more from these authors. Enjoy and see you at the end of the video. I love visiting my grandma. She always makes the food that I like, and in large quantities, and spoils me. With the hustle and bustle of college life, it's nice to go back to my childhood and allow myself to be spoiled for a few hours every few weeks. Even though she has 6 grandchildren, she made it clear that I'm her absolute favorite. She'd often have the whole family around for dinner, and after they left, she'd bring out the good stuff she made just for me. We usually have a big Christmas dinner together with the whole family. However, as the years go by and the younger ones start growing up, fewer and fewer people show up. Last year, everyone already made plans, forgetting about poor Grandma. I don't blame them, but they often forget how these visits mean a lot to her, especially ever since Grandpa died. That's why when I talked on the phone with her and she asked me if I had any plans, I lied to her and told her I didn't. She immediately jumped at the opportunity to politely invite me, going so far as to offer me to sleep over at her place. She said there's one room which hasn't been used in years, and I could stay in there. I immediately said yes and agreed to stay over, realizing how happy that would make her. I canceled the plans I made with my friends, telling them something else came up. Although they were bummed about it a little, their drinking party wouldn't stop because of me. That was the last Christmas that I would ever spend with my grandma. On Christmas Eve, I arrived to my grandma's place, and she greeted me like she always does, with a tight hug and lots of kisses. I barely even stepped inside when she started offering me food. She had already made what could only be described as an all-you-can-eat buffet. We dug in, and once we were done, she showed me where I could sleep for the night. It was a cozy little bedroom, which apparently used to be my mom's room when she was little. Grandma told me not to leave my room during Christmas night in order to avoid disrupting Santa in his work. She said that if I really needed to use the bathroom I could, but to be extremely quiet and not to go downstairs. On the nightstand she left a list of the things I should do before I go to bed to ensure I get a good present. I decided to play along and abide by the rules. I told her I'd read it before bed and do everything necessary, and she seemed content with that. She wished me good night and left the room. I was pretty tired from the trip there and the enormous dinner I've eaten, so I lay down on the bed and involuntarily fell asleep within minutes. I awoke a few hours later. I glanced at my watch and realized it was 3:01 a.m. I got up to grab a glass of water downstairs from the kitchen and groggily walked through the dark, trying to avoid any loud noise or turning on the lights, not to wake Grandma. I went downstairs and turned on the kitchen light, gulping down a glass of water. I glanced towards the living room at the Christmas tree and something caught my attention under the glow of the decoration lights. There was a small plate with a tiny paper that said "For Santa." I reckoned it was cookies and milk, but when I got closer I realized that the plate was empty. Red liquid was in it, and right next to the plate was a small bucket. Obviously, I found this weird, but figured that Grandma may have just forgotten to put it away or something. I turned off the kitchen lights and returned to my room, just then remembering the list my grandma gave me. I grabbed it off my nightstand and started reading. Dear James, thank you for visiting me for Christmas. You made your grandma really happy. Now Christmas is a little different in this house than what you're probably used to, so it's very important that you follow these rules on the list. 1. Make sure to close your windows and ensure they are closed properly. These old windows don't work properly sometimes, so if you feel like cold air is coming in, let me know. 2. Don't put any wood in the fireplace after 9 p.m. Santa will be really angry if it's scalding in the chimney or if there's still smoke. 3. You didn't forget about milk and cookies, did you? I stopped reading and chuckled at the list. Grandma clearly wanted me to follow the basic rules for Santa like when I was a kid. But again, I decided to oblige. I continued reading the list. In this household, we don't use milk and cookies. We use raw meat and blood. I already left a bucket by the Christmas tree and there's a raw piece of chicken I put on the plate. Santa sure loves his diet. 4. If you are woken up by the sound of scratching or knocking on your window, ignore it. Your room is on the second floor. There is no way to reach up to it. In fact, it's best not to look there. But if you see someone beckoning you, pretend they're not there. They may try to open the window from the outside. This is why it's so important to keep the windows closed. 5. You may hear growling coming from the kitchen. It's okay because Santa never comes upstairs, and since I already left the chicken for him, that should satisfy him. By this point, I was sure Grandma was just messing with me. That was until I heard the sound of 3 gentle knocks on the window behind me. I froze in place, staring at the list, but practically staring through it. 3 more gentle knocks ensued, but I did my best not to give away that I heard them. Once again, there were 3 more knocks, and then the sound of scratching started. First gently and then louder, as if a rat was trying to bite through the wall. It lasted for around a minute until it completely stopped. Only when it did I gather enough courage to slightly shift my position. That was a mistake though, because when I looked down to the floor, at the light which was cast in from the window, I saw the unmistakable shadow in the form of a humanoid silhouette stretched across. I couldn't tell for sure, but it looked like whoever was there held both his hands on the window and stared directly towards me. I decided that the best thing to do is continue reading the list to try and distract myself. 6. If someone walks into your room while you're sleeping and you happen to wake up, pretend that you're still asleep. In the worst case scenario, the person will sit on the edge of your bed and observe you, so do your best not to let them know you're awake. If you feel their breath on your neck and it gets progressively closer, it means they realized you're awake. 7. You may hear me calling you from downstairs. Don't listen to it. I will under no circumstances go downstairs during the night. 8. Last and most important rule. If you get up to go to the bathroom, never ever ever turn on any lights in the house. He has trouble noticing you in the dark, but if you turn on the lights, he will be able to follow you wherever you go, and then not even locking your door will help. 9. Follow these simple rules and in the morning we can open your Christmas presents. Love, Grandma. The scratching and knocking had already stopped by the time I was done reading, and the shadow from the window was gone. I got into bed and covered myself over my head, shivering, and not from the cold. Sometime during the night I heard my door open, but did my best to ignore the footsteps and low growling noise. I either passed out or fell asleep sometime later, but all I know is I woke up to the sound coming downstairs from the kitchen. I shot up, looking around the room and at the window, rubbing my temples and thinking about the nightmare I had. I left my room and immediately heard my grandma's voice calling me from downstairs to come open the presents. I told her I'm coming when I suddenly felt a grip on my wrist. I turned around and saw my grandma there, staring at me, wide-eyed. She leaned in and whispered in my ear with a trembling voice, "You turned on the lights, didn't you?" Second story. My son went missing on Christmas, and I just found something disturbing in his room. I believe it goes without saying that every parent's worst nightmare is losing their children. 3 days ago, that nightmare became a reality for me as I took a single bite of Santa's cookie and went upstairs to wake my 2 boys up. My youngest, Clyde, had already been awake and sitting patiently on his bed, eagerly awaiting my signal to head downstairs and start opening gifts. This was not all too surprising. What 12 and 7-year-old boys sleep in on Christmas morning? What was surprising was that Jack's bed was empty. He was nowhere to be found, despite my tucking him in his bed and wishing him a good night around 9 p.m. the previous night. The detectives are supposedly still investigating, but I am fully aware of the horrifying statistic that after the first 48 hours of being missing, the chances of finding my son become very slim. I'm also quite sure that they still consider me a suspect, although their initial investigation failed to prove that. Earlier today, while helping Clyde with his math homework, I threw one of his little Nerf footballs across the room, and after a couple bounces, it became lodged between the wall and Jack's bed. I walked on over and pulled the bed away from the wall a bit to retrieve it, and that's when I noticed the loose floorboard. I don't understand how this was missed by both myself and the detectives that scoured his room, but it was quite obvious once I did notice it. I believe what I found in there may have something to do with Jack's disappearance. Being a single father of 2 and working a full-time job left me very little time, especially around the holidays, to carry on the many different Christmas traditions that I had as a child. So on the first day of December, when I first saw the little raggedy-looking elf on the shelf, I was very impressed that Jack had took it upon himself to start this tradition for his little brother. When I had first asked him about it, his demeanor changed drastically, and he demanded that no one ever touch the elf. I left it at that. After all, the story says the elf will lose its magic if touched by a human. I didn't want to ruin it for Clyde, so I just played along. Each morning, the little elf would show up in a new spot in our small home. I was so proud of my boy for being such a great big brother. The reason I bring the elf up is because what I found under the floorboard in his room was some kind of homemade children's book titled Elf on the Shelf. It was written crudely with different colored markers for each letter, although clearly written by someone with a very shaky hand. I handed the book over to the detectives, but not before writing down a copy for myself. I really don't know what to make of this, but I know it has something to do with whoever took my son. Elf on the Shelf. Have you ever wondered how anyone could know if you're naughty or nice each year as you grow? For hundreds of years, it's been a big secret. It now can be shared if you promise to keep it. This year you were chosen. He sent me to you. I watch and report on all that you do. My job's an assignment from the big man himself. I am just his helper, a little scout elf. While I'm here visiting the place you call home, remain in your room, be sure not to roam. Once you are ready, the mission can start. Whose name will you scream as he rips out your heart? Will it be Father or Clyde? He can't take you all, so you must decide. Each night while you're sleeping, to your room he will fly. No one can know, or else they will die. Of course, a little magic helps me be quick. I record your whole day and report with a click. I tell him if you have been good or been bad. The news of the day makes him happy or sad. One word about this, and I'll report to the boss. But keeping this secret will not be a loss. In the car, at the park, or even at school. Word will get out if you break a rule. He will be gone before you awake. Speak a word to anyone and your brother he'll take. You'll jump out of bed and come running to see who'll be the first to beg and to plea. Maybe in the kitchen, the bathroom, or the den is where you'll find dear Clyde met his end. I can hide on a plant, a shelf, or a frame. Where will I be? Let's make it a game. There's another important rule you must know. Choose to ignore it and his rage will grow. Keep your window unlocked before you climb into bed. Think wonderful thoughts inside that little head. How else can he check how good you have been? He might start to think you forgot about him. The night before Christmas, my job's at an end. The rest of the year, in paradise we'll spend. So blow them a kiss and bid them farewell. We'll fly far away, but you can never tell. Of course they will miss you, but wait till next year. When the holidays come, I'll again reappear. I wish every girl and each boy a safe place to hide. Until next year when I visit young Clyde. I am only posting here out of complete desperation. If anyone knows anything that could help locate my sweet boy, please message me right away. Third story. They say the average child stops believing in Santa around the age of 8, maybe 8.5, but not me. Because I'm not like other kids. You see, I've actually met Santa many times. Now I know what you're thinking. That's not possible. Santa isn't real. Well, you're both right and wrong at the same time. And for that very reason, I stopped telling people the story after I turned 10. But it goes something like this. I remember loving Christmas. The lights, the sounds, the decorations, the stockings, and most of all, like any young child, waiting for Santa to come down the chimney to give me my presents. One Christmas Eve, when I was 4 years old, I remember insisting to my mom that we leave just the right amount of cookies on the table for him. For some reason, My 4-year-old self had decided that he only liked the oatmeal ones, and not those made with chocolate chips, like we actually had in the kitchen. So my mom and I cooked up a batch just to leave for him, a batch that she helped me bake with love, knowing they would go to waste. That night, I remember putting myself to bed extra early, knowing that the faster I went to sleep, the faster I would wake up in the morning, to the presents that always awaited me on Christmas morning. I had been fast asleep that night when I was suddenly awoken by the sound of rustling on the roof above me. This was it, I thought to myself. It's Santa. I'll finally catch him in the act. So I snuck out of bed, tiptoed downstairs, and as expected spotted a man with a white beard, all dressed in red, standing in the living room by the Christmas tree. I ran to my parents' bedroom in excitement and tugged at their sheets. "Mommy, Daddy, Santa's here, Santa's here." My dad rolled over, eyes still closed, and humored me. "Oh yeah?" "Yeah, he just came down the chimney." "That's nice. Now go to bed, Bobby," my mom added before they both returned to their slumbers. I did as she said and went back to my room. But as soon as I heard my dad begin snoring again, I carefully made my way back down to the living room to catch another glimpse of Santa. I peeked my head around the corner, and there he was. It's really him. It's really Santa. I kept staring at him, not wanting to miss a moment of his visit when he finally noticed me. He seemed puzzled for a moment before he waved me over. "Hi, Santa." I began to excitedly call him by name, but he quickly placed one finger over his mouth. "Shh, Bobby," he whispered, before picking up one of the cookies we had left on a plate for him, dipping it in the glass of milk beside it, and taking a bite. Eventually, he reached into a large green velvet bag, which was filled to the brim with packages, and removed one. He then proceeded to place the wrapped box on a rocking chair beside him, and patted the seat, gesturing for me to join him. Who was I to disobey Santa? I thought to myself, as I ran over to the chair, picked up the package, hopped onto the seat, and opened the gift in a scurry. I muttered as I unwrapped it and removed it from its packaging. It was a humble wooden box, with a surface like a chessboard, containing several small pieces, each resembling festive objects like a reindeer, a candy cane, a snowman, and a Christmas tree. "It's a game," Santa said with a smile before explaining the rules. "Reindeer beats candy cane beats snowman, snowman beats the Christmas tree, and the Christmas tree beats reindeer." We played the game for hours, and as the night went on, I gradually learned how to play. That first year, he let me win. I know that for sure. After the third game that night, he smiled and told me I was good at the game. He then tipped his red cap, stood up, and let himself out the front door. As soon as my parents woke up the next morning, I rushed to tell them everything that had happened. But they laughed off my story, likely dismissing it as a child's fantasy. And we went about our Christmas Day traditions just as we always had. Looking back on it from a kid's perspective, there was nothing unusual about it at all. I was just playing a game with Santa, and so I couldn't have been more excited when he returned a year later, with the same game. We played it again and I won again, which Santa seemed to be impressed by, laughing aloud as he scarfed down his cookies. It wasn't until the third year where things changed. That year, I was once again excited to play the now annual game with Santa, and just as he always did, he reached into his bag. But this time, he pulled out a different game. Not unlike the first, but this board was larger, with more pieces and far more complex. "Okay, Bobby, now that you're old enough, we're going to play for real." I wasn't sure what he was getting at, but I agreed to play anyway. He explained the new rules, which were a bit more difficult to follow, and we began to play. And this time, Santa won. Letting out a soft chuckle, he removed 2 items from his pocket, a piece of charcoal and a scroll. He then unrolled the paper, revealing the words, "Naughty List." Below them was a list of names. He then proceeded to take the piece of charcoal and scratch it across the first name on the list, until it was completely crossed out. And then he simply left, just as he always did, through the front door. Truth be told, I didn't think much of it at the time, or the next year, or the one after that. And every year that he won, he would do as he always did, and scratch a name off the naughty list. Now, around this time, It just so happened that in my town, there came to be known something that the locals referred to as the Christmas murders. For 3 years in a row, 3 people had died on Christmas. We all knew their names well: Daniel Jones, Sarah Anderson, and Michael Taylor. By now, I was just old enough to be suspicious of the correlation. So the next year, when Santa came around again, I paid careful attention to the first name on the list and memorized it before Santa crossed it out: David Miller. And sure enough, the next day, the headline of our newspaper read, "Christmas Slayer strikes again, this year David Miller." That's when I realized that every time I lost the game to Santa, an innocent person died. That's when I realized that this was not Santa. This was someone else. After that, I stopped looking forward to his visit. I tried everything, locking myself in my room, hiding in the attic, even running outside. But every year Santa found me. Every year we played the game. And every year that I lost, someone died. But last year was different. Last year, I refused to play the game. "But you have to, Bobby," Santa insisted. "Or what?" I shot back. "Well, let's see who's on the list this year," he said as he removed the paper from his pocket, unrolled it, and lowered his glasses. "Ah, yes, just as I thought." He pointed to the first name on the list. It was mine. "I don't want to," I cried out as I began to walk away. "If you don't play, then you get scratched off the naughty list, Bobby. And what do you think happens then?" "Who the freak are you?" I shouted. "I want to know, now." He belted out a laugh, just as Santa always did in all of those children's Christmas stories and movies, with his eyes closed and holding his belly, seemingly charmed by my reaction. "You know me, Bobby. I'm Santa." "Get out, I'm calling the cops." "Then you forfeit," he said menacingly as he removed a piece of coal from his pocket and was about to scratch off my name. "Wait," I called out as I stopped at the door and turned back to him. "All right, fine," I said, defeated, agreeing to play the game. And so, sitting there, across from Santa and looking down at the wooden pieces, I began to think about everything he had ever taught me about the game, starting at the beginning. Reindeer beats candy cane beats snowman beats the Christmas tree, and the Christmas tree beats reindeer. But he was good at the game. Too good. And nearly lured me into a false move. But this year, I was playing more carefully. I thought about every possible move, what his maneuver might be in return, and how I could counter. Somehow, I got the feeling that I was about to make the exact move that Santa wanted me to make. But I was resilient. No matter what, this year, I had to win. And so I did. "Christmas tree beats reindeer," I said defiantly as I moved my Christmas tree piece forward, knocking his reindeer to the board. "Good job, Bobby." Santa congratulated me with a smile before standing up and walking away. "Maybe next year, I won't go so easy on you," he said, before walking out the door just as he always had. That was last Christmas. Coincidentally, the first year our town didn't see a Christmas murder. And since then, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Who is he? Why does he make me play the game? Is he doing this to anyone else? And will it ever stop? To this day, I still don't know the answers. But what I do know is, Christmas is now just 7 days away. And all I want for Christmas this year is to stop playing the game. Fourth story. My hands are trembling as I write this. I'm hiding in my towel closet. I called the cops, but I don't think they'll be here in time. I mean, who takes calls on Christmas Eve seriously? They probably think I'm some teenager prank calling them since I have nothing better to do than take away time from someone's Christmas. Who would believe what I'm about to say anyway? Let me back things up and set the scene for you. I live alone 2 states away from my family. I feel terrible for not being able to visit them this year. I've been having financial struggles as of recent. Paying off student loans is no joke. This is the first time I've been able to live on my own. I'm renting a cabin in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. All that's around is a convenience store and a bar. The place is nice and the rent is cheap, so who am I to complain? 1 bed, 1 bath, and a cramped kitchen that's right behind the living room. The living room has a nice fireplace too. It keeps the house warm through the night. So now that you've got the picture, I need to share my experience, no matter how few people see it. I didn't have big plans for the holidays. Stay at home, watch some TV, and eat a frozen pizza if I was lucky. No big fancy dinner, no visitors, just an average night. That's just what happened. I kicked back on the couch with pizza in hand and watched Christmas movies until my eyes grew heavy. I was awakened by a knock at my door at around 11:45. It's dark and snowy out, per usual this time of year. I don't get visitors, nor could I see who it was, so I looked out of the small window in the living room. Frost cloaked the glass, making it a challenge to see who was waiting for my answer. I could make out a human-like figure. My gut was telling me to stay the hell away from what was at my door before I even got a chance to move. The snow was falling so heavily that it was hard to see anything beyond 6 feet of my house. I trusted my gut, though, and moved to my room. I began to think I was a bad person for leaving whoever was out there in that icy mess. Just as the thought entered my mind, the knocking grew louder. I covered my ears in response to the noise beyond my door. I faced away and it only got worse. I was right to trust my gut. I shouldn't have opened the door. I can't let this go on. I exhaled deeply and threw my legs over the bed and reluctantly shuffled over to my door. I twisted the knob and peeked outside. The cold weather nipped at my face as a reply. "Hello?" I peered through the crack. "Hi," the person started. I began to make out facial characteristics and realized it was a young woman. My car broke down and this seemed like a good place to seek shelter. That was a red flag to me. There's a convenience store and a bar within a mile of each other. Why show up to a random house for help? Now, I consider myself a nice guy, but the holidays don't make me a giving person. I don't like my sleep being interrupted either. I wasn't sure how to respond. Her behavior was off, to say the least. She was glancing over her shoulder as if she could see anything through the darkness and snow. "I can give you a number for a towing company. There should be an inn at least a few miles from here. The towing company can take you." She didn't seem satisfied. "Are you sure?" she inquired. "It's awfully cold out here, and I don't know how long it will take them to get here." She began to look more paranoid. Her eyes darted from side to side, up and down. It was really freaking me out. "Listen, hun, my house is a wreck and it's the middle of the night. I'm sorry, I know it's the holidays, but I have a thing about letting strangers into my house." I immediately regretted saying those words. Her fear turned to anger. At this point, she became hysterical. She kicked, punched, and beat my door, trying to force herself in. Her polite words were now screams. "Let me in!" she screamed. The Jane Doe at my door pounded harder and harder. It seemed like my door was about to break. What the hell are you supposed to do in this situation? So in the spur of the moment, I just locked the door. The knob rattled violently, then stopped abruptly. I picked up my phone and alerted authorities that there was a manic woman outside of my house. At this point, I figured she had given up and left. I sat down in front of the TV and tried to enjoy the rest of the night. I pondered why she was so upset. No family, trauma, none of my theories added up. Just as my thinking had concluded and I began to relax, I heard a faint sound. A sound that was so quiet, but seemed so loud. It was the shuffling of snow outside of my window. I pulled my blinds back and peeked outside. The dim light from the street lamps shone onto my white lawn. The woman was making a circle in the snow. I squinted, trying not to reveal my presence. My eyes began to adjust to the darkness outside. It was now 1 a.m. There were symbols I couldn't recognize and a large pentagram in the center. When she finished her artwork, she looked right at me. She was staring into my soul. Her gaze sent chills down my spine. Her mouth opened at inhuman angles. Just then, a scream was released. I fell back into the couch. I called the cops for a second time. Writing this, I'll be censoring my address for my own security. Here's how that phone call went. "I need police. Please come quick." "Sir, we already have the sheriff and backup on their way. They should be there within the hour. Lock your doors." I heard a click on the other end. Well, what am I supposed to do now? I'm alone in this house, which seems much more ominous than the night before. there's some psycho lady standing in my yard in the middle of the night. To top it off, the cops that should be arresting this woman are probably out for drinks. I let out an audible sigh and sat on the floor with my back to the couch. This was not what I thought of as an ideal Christmas. I figured I might as well freshen up and get ready for bed. Any sliver of hope left in me was gone. I picked myself up off the floor and made my way to the bathroom. I didn't want to risk her seeing me, so I just used the dim flashlight on my phone. I brushed my teeth and rinsed my face. I thought that would make me feel better, more alert. I was wrong. Once I had finished, I heard a knock at the door, followed by a scream. It was deep, unlike the shrieks previously heard from the girl. Something in me clicked. I mustered the strength to peek outside. There were blue and red lights flashing, signaling help had arrived. But something was wrong. The lights from the car further illuminated my lawn. There were 2 mangled bodies left inside of what I can only describe as the altar. Remnants of black uniforms informed me of who they were: police. Another guttural howl was heard, this time only a few feet away from my window. I did the only thing I could think of, and that was to hide. That brings me to the now. I'm in my towel closet. There are 2 dead bodies in the snow and something outside of my house. Something not human. I don't know when she or it or whatever the fuck you want to call it will get inside, but my gut is saying that she will. I couldn't have picked a worse spot to hide. I feel like the idiot friend in a horror movie that gets plucked off first. Please, if you're reading this, protect yourself this holiday season. Don't let it know you're there. Don't be like me. Please save yourself and your family. I just heard something come down the chimney and it's not Santa. She's inside. 5th story. One of my favorite parts of Christmas Eve when I was a kid was story time. I grew up in a big family, and every year my parents would have the whole gang over, all of my aunts and uncles from both sides of the family, my 8 cousins, and my grandparents. Of course, being kids, my cousins and I all thirsted after the gifts that we would see pile up under the Christmas tree like falling snow. But after we had unwrapped our new toys and were completely numb from how much food we had eaten, we would gather around at our grandmother's feet and she would tell us stories. Grandma was a great storyteller. She always had this twinkle in her eye as she leaned in close and whispered to us, "Once upon a time." The whole room would fall silent when Grandma spoke. Even the adults in the room would turn their heads to listen to whatever concoction her brain had come up with that year. The multicolored lights from the Christmas tree would twinkle behind her head to match that glimmer in her eye. My grandmother died earlier this year. It's going to be our first Christmas without story time. Even as my cousins and I aged into our teenage years, our parents into their 50s, and our grandparents into their 80s, my grandmother never stopped telling her stories. Christmas this year isn't going to be the same. Recently, I've been reminiscing about Grandma's story time, trying to remember her greatest hits. I've been wanting to remember them as accurately as possible, so that maybe I can make note of what I remember and go from there so that I can keep the Christmas storytelling tradition going when my cousins and I have children of our own. I've remembered about 7 of Grandma's stories so far, but the reason I'm writing on nosleep today is because I've remembered another one that she told when I was about 10 years old. This story is a peculiar one, the only bizarre one that Grandma ever told us, and I want to share it with you guys. I don't remember exactly what the title of the story was, but it goes something like this. In my own words, what is a child's favorite part of Christmas? The presents, obviously. And after Mommy and Daddy, who do children immediately think of when they think of presents under the tree? Santa Claus, of course. The big man in the bright red suit, jolly laugh and herd of reindeer to pull him through the snowy night sky as he delivers presents to every good kid around the world. There is not a single child that I know who doesn't get excited when they think about Santa Claus. Good kids get presents and naughty kids get coal. At least every kid gets something. But Santa's challenge isn't just about getting around the whole world in one night and delivering presents. No, he has more to worry about than that. You see, children, Santa doesn't visit every house, but every house gets a visit on Christmas Eve. Not many people know this, but there is another Santa, except, of course, he isn't Santa. Physically, they look more or less the same, except the other Santa doesn't wear a bright red suit. He looks different to every child. He doesn't have a jolly laugh, he just stares. He doesn't drink milk and eat cookies. In fact, he doesn't eat anything. He doesn't have a sled pulled by reindeer, and he doesn't come down the chimney. No, he gets in through the back door or from the basement, and he knows where all the children's rooms are. He never delivers presents, but he does punish the naughty children. How bad the punishment is depends on how bad you've been that year. He can make children very sick. Some children visited by him have had the stomach flu that lasted 2 weeks, where they nearly died from dehydration. There are some accounts of some children whose pets or parents just vanished in the middle of the night, never to be heard of or seen again. In the more extreme cases, some naughty children have had their houses burnt down, losing everything and everyone in it except themselves. My grandmother had heard of this boy named Bobby who lived a few towns over from her growing up. He was visited by the other Santa one year on Christmas Eve. According to what she had heard from the neighbors, Bobby had woken up in the middle of the night because his dog was whimpering, and he had the worst pain in his foot. Getting up to go see what was wrong with Baxter, he fell face down as soon as his feet hit the floor because, well, all of his toes had been cut off. You could tell whoever did it probably used a saw because of the tendrils of skin and shattered pieces of bone that were sticking out of where his toes used to be. There was blood all over his sheets. Bobby screamed and screamed, and his dog's whimpering just kept getting louder and louder. Bobby couldn't take the sound, and despite his pain, he managed to drag himself across the floor all the way over to the kitchen, where his dog was. When he found him, his screams just kept coming. Baxter was kneeling in the corner of the kitchen, where he also saw his father, sobbing and holding a baseball bat, crouched beside the body of his mother. Her teeth were scattered all over the floor, and her face was pulpy with blood and bone. She twitched incessantly on the floor while Bobby's father sobbed. His dog whimpered, and Bobby screamed. But how did you know who was going to be visiting you on Christmas Eve? Santa or the other Santa? You didn't, Grandma said. If you've been naughty, you better pray and pray and pray that all you received that year was coal, and not a horrible sickness or a dead family or missing body parts. Although I don't remember the story exactly as Grandma told it, there is one thing I remember that she said once the story was done, which was a bizarre thing for her to say since we were all so young. I also remembered she had made sure Storytime this year was told in a room where the rest of the adults couldn't hear her tale. Why do you think Santa and Satan sound almost exactly the same? Sixth story. It all started when I was a little girl. Christmas Eve 2004. I was 8 years old. Santa, is that you? Footfalls on the staircase echoed through the house as I jumped out of bed and ran past the door frame to catch a glimpse of the man himself. I waited patiently in the hall just outside my room. An outline appeared at the top of the stairs and then slowly made its way to me. The floorboards struggled to hold its weight as the sound of bending wood ricocheted off the walls and burrowed into my ears. Once the figure reached me, its form was illuminated, bathed in the dim moonlight that shone through my bedroom window and leaked out into the hallway. My excitement was immediately replaced with pure terror. The thing standing in front of me was not Santa, not by a long shot. It was a walking shadow, a dense patchwork of pitch blackness in the shape of a man. I could neither breathe evenly in its presence, nor could I bring myself to run, petrified in a state of shock. Then he made his move. Darkness spilled out from the shadow man's hands as he extended his arms out over me. Soon I was encased in it, all light fading from view. Aside from the pounding in my chest, all sound had ceased as well. "Daddy!" All I could think to do was call out to my father. Surely he would rescue me from this nightmare. "Daddy, help! I'm in here!" Of course he never showed. Wherever I was, whatever energy had enveloped me, I was now unreachable. My connection to the outside world was lost, and I was alone. Before the inclination to cry or scream further could kick in, my tomb broke apart and dissipated entirely, revealing new surroundings. I wasn't home anymore, not even close. Despite the circumstances, it was breathtaking. Less a place than it was an endless expanse. There were constellations all around, at my sides, above, and even below me. The only thing that separated us was a thin, almost transparent glow. It made up a floor beneath my feet, a ceiling overhead, and walls, barely visible in the distance. It was an inexplicable light box off in some segment of the universe, partitioned from the rest. An absurd but brilliant architecture, resting in the framework of space. In admiring the stars and galaxies, I took in a dreadful sight. The Shadow Man was there with me, just a few yards from my position. He bolted in my direction, and I ran, faster than I had ever run before. Escape, however, was not an option. We were in an enclosed environment. Large as it may have been, there were no exits, or at least none that I knew of. Still, guided by a pervasive fear, I ran. I ran until my lungs caught fire and my legs gave out. I collapsed, and that's when he struck. The predator leaned over his wounded prey and placed his hands over my chest. From there, I was drained, not of my energy, but something else. A swirl of glowing particles arose from my body as the silhouette craned his neck back in satisfaction, like a wolf howling at the moon. His dark, featureless face will forever be etched into my memory. And then, as I was nearly sucked dry of whatever it was the shadow sought from me, my consciousness wavered. In a matter of seconds, my eyelids drooped and the lights went out. At the time, I thought it was death taking hold. Even at 8 years old, I welcomed it, anything to end the torment. But as luck would have it, this was not death chasing and torturing me in a light box among the stars. It was something far worse. I awoke in bed, my father stationed at my side, trying his best to calm me. "Come on, sweetie, it's okay. It was just a nightmare." I wrapped my arms around him and squeezed as tightly as I could, elated to see him again, when just moments before I was convinced I never would. It was a monster. It was gonna get me. He pulled my arms away and held my hands in his, looking me right in the eye. "It was just a bad dream. I won't let anyone hurt you, okay, Chelsea? Not ever." His words were comforting, but he was wrong. "It wasn't a dream. You have to believe me, Daddy." He sighed and smiled. "Well, there's nothing we can do about it now. I'll leave the door open a crack, and you try to get some sleep, okay?" I nodded, and he left. But I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. It wasn't a dream. I was certain of that. Every bone in my body rattled, and the skin around them crawled at the mere thought of the Shadow Man and his light box. It was real. I knew it was. The years came and went. Every Christmas Eve was the same. Creaks on the stairs followed by the Shadow Man taking me to his light box and bleeding me of my life force. Then, I would wake in my father's arms as he consoled me to the best of his ability. No matter how much I insisted it was all true, my psychiatrist and father both believed it to be a recurring nightmare, nothing more. Eventually, I stopped screaming in the middle of the night and pretended to be normal, if for no other reason than to be treated as such. I lied and told them it was over. From that point forward, no one would ever have to know but me. It was my cross and mine alone to bear. More time passed and I grew up. I graduated from college and bought a house of my own. The light box stayed with me every step of the way, but I never backed down, outright refusing to let it control my life. This attitude gave me strength in the face of trauma, and for a while it felt like I was winning. The Christmas Eves didn't get any easier, but the fear and misery I experienced in the aftermath that followed was fading faster with each passing year. If this was something I had to live with, at least I could do it on my own terms. It's what she would have wanted. But then the unthinkable happened. Christmas Eve 2019. This would be the first holiday I spent in my new home. The sound was identical to the one from my childhood. Though I had grown used to the routine, it didn't stop me from hoping each year that it would finally be over, especially now being in a new location for the first time. Location, of course, didn't matter. I was its focus, not the place. I hid under my blankets as the goosebumps started forming. Being used to the routine also didn't afford me a thicker skin in the moments leading up to each event. As soon as it began, I was transformed into an 8-year-old girl again, frightened of the boogeyman. This was it. I steeled myself and braced for the worst. The milky black fog then seeped under the covers and engulfed me completely, placing me in an all too familiar coffin. From there, the darkness relented and transferred me to that godforsaken light box in the sky. Everything looked the same, just as it always had, save for one glaring difference. The Shadow Man was gone. In his place, a gentleman in turn-of-the-century attire, sitting at a desk. "Hello, Chelsea. Please have a seat. I think it's time we talked." I was floored. This had never happened before. There was never any dissonance in past events across years of being abducted. It was always the same. "I can see that you're confused. Please, have a seat, and all will be explained." The feelings that washed over me in this moment were many. Relief over not being chased again. Hopeful that this was the end of my many tortured holidays, and even proud that I had somehow ended it myself, having stood my ground over the years. The one that bubbled to the surface above all the rest, however, was curiosity. That's why I did as instructed and sat at the desk across from the mystery man, anticipating the answers he could offer me. "Okay, Chelsea, fire away. What is it you want to know first?" I pondered a moment and then asked, "What is this place?" The man smiled. "It's the place where your kind come to rest after expiration." "Expiration?" I asked. "You mean death?" "Yes, not here specifically, of course. This is just where we harvest energy." I looked around at the vast emptiness. "Really? There's nothing here?" The man chuckled. "Of course there is. You just can't see it. We're a loose collection of molecules doing work at a subatomic level, myself included. I only took this form to make things easier for you. Here, have a visual representation." The man snapped his fingers, and all at once the light box vanished. We were still at the desk, but were now at the center of a massive office space, surrounded by what must have been thousands of cubicles, all with their own workers, rifling through documents and filing cabinets and answering phone calls. I looked back to the man, still confused. "I don't understand. Is this heaven? Are you angels? What's going on?" He scoffed. "Angels? Heaven? That's just what you humans call us. Here, we're just celestial overseers in the next world. No labels, just work and dedication." Nothing was making sense. "Why am I here? Why is any of this happening to me?" The man offered a look of vague concern. "Well, Chelsea, heaven doesn't run on will alone. It needs energy to keep going, and we take it from people like you." A short man with glasses hobbled over with a stack of paperwork. "Overseer, what should I do with—" "Not now, Lucian, can't you see I'm busy?" Lucian's eyes widened with regret. "Sorry, sir." He took off into the maze of cubicles, a trail of papers left on the floor in his wake. "I'm sorry about that. It's so hard to find good help these days. Where were we? Oh yes, energy." He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Despair is the greatest energy reserve in the universe. One soul's worth is enough to power heaven for years. Because of that, we send operatives out every now and again to collect soul pieces from humans. You were the next candidate on our list." "Me? Why?" I asked. He leaned forward and his lips contorted into a wicked smile. "Your mother's death? Ring any bells? It was a perfect storm, really. Your mother passing on Christmas Eve, the night when a child is supposed to be at their happiest. From that point on, the holiday was tainted for you. You hurt with every breath you've breathed since, but the anniversary of her death bridges you to our world. It's when your despair is at its peak, ripe for collection." A knot formed in the pit of my stomach. As hard as it was to overcome the Shadow Man's visits, it was nothing compared to the pain I felt every single day over the loss of my mother, even as an adult. When I was 6 years old, I wrote a letter to Santa asking for a cure. It would be my Christmas gift to see her better and walking around again. The cancer took her anyway, and it destroyed our family. When the Shadow Man first came up those stairs years ago, I desperately hoped it was Santa, so I could ask him to bring her back. The tears came without warning and quickly wet my face. Chelsea, don't fret, you're one of the lucky ones. Most people have their soul ripped apart until they die and are banished into the ether with all the other abominations. But you've lasted far longer than the rest, well into adulthood. Your soul is tarnished, but you still cling to life with a vicious grip, the likes of which I've never seen. I wiped away my tears and looked back at the man, a smug expression painted across his face. So what is this? You're letting me go? His boisterous laughter bounced off the cubicles and rang in my ears. Quite the contrary, Chelsea. Now that your soul is damaged, I want to remap it. Insert my own pieces and build a better weapon. With you, we can extract more energy, enough to sustain us for centuries to come. My heart sank when I realized what he was saying. The Shadow Man. I would become a creature like him. No, I refuse. Oh, Chelsea, you don't have a choice in the matter. He snapped his fingers, and we were in another room. I was strapped down in a chair and could not move, much as I tried. The man came around wearing a lab coat and brought with him a cart full of sharp utensils. Don't worry, Chelsea, this is only going to hurt a lot. I screamed, but it didn't faze him. He picked up a silver scalpel and carved deep into my chest. The pain was intolerable, and I vocalized it. No need to cry, Chelsea. You have a lot of tissue around your soul, but I'll get to it. Just you wait. It'll all be over soon. Though it shouldn't have been possible, he reached his arm all the way into me. The pain had yet to subside, but the sensation took the foreground. It was undoubtedly the strangest thing I've ever felt. Ah, there it is. Lucien, bring the pieces. Lucien stumbled in with a tray of jars, each with a faint orb of light inside, and then placed it on the cart. Thank you, Lucien. You may leave. The man awkwardly reached for a jar, his other arm still in my chest. Lucien was still there, watching. Here, sir, let me help you. Lucien attempted to push the tray closer. It collided with the man's arm and fell to the floor, breaking every last jar and freeing the soul fragments within, creating a remarkable disk of light in the middle of the room that grew larger with each passing moment. The man pulled his arm out of my chest. God damn it, Lucien, I told you to leave. If the light from these souls reacts with hers, she could reconstitute and wake. We'll have to wait for the next bridge. You idiot. The light washed over the room and filled my field of view. I was entombed again, but not in darkness. It was a soothing energy that seemed to heal my wounds and render me painless. Then, like the darkness before it, it dissipated and transported me far, far away. In a strange turn of events, I had been saved. I awoke in the comfort of my bed at home, jumping upright with a loud gasp, taking in as much air as I could. After gathering some composure, I noticed a slight burning between my breasts, so I ran to the bathroom, removed my bra, and faced the mirror. That's when I saw it. It was a souvenir from heaven, a scar right where the man cut me open, a reminder of things to come. This Christmas Eve, when my despair bridges the gap between our worlds, I will be waiting. However foolish it may be, when I'm in heaven again, I will stop at nothing to see my mother. Now that I know an afterlife exists, it's the only thing on my mind. Mom, if you're out there listening somewhere watching over me, just know that I'm coming and I won't let them have me. We'll be together again, you, me, and Dad, I promise. I'm going to bring you back, whatever it takes. Thank you for watching until the end. Please let me know if you like this format with multiple shorter stories in one video, and maybe I'll do more in the future. Also, if you've enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful Christmas and see you in the next video.